Good morning, children, and I welcome you in your civics class. And I hope that you all are fit, very fine, healthy, and also I hope that you have done your unit test very well and will get good marks. And children, good morning. And as you know that we have started the chapter from your civics portion, that is what is democracy and why democracy, and one lecture I have already sent you, and I hope that you all have watched that video. So before starting the chapter, before starting the topic, let's remember the God's name, and let's start the day with beautiful smile and positive thought, and with the hymen of God's name. And as you know that whenever we start our day with God's name and a prayer, our day will become more beautiful and more special for us, isn't it, girls? So let's start the day with a beautiful, graceful smile on your face and God's name and positive thought. So, children, as you know that we have already discussed the uh, background of the chapter, and also we have already discussed about the definition of democracy and about the features of democratic government. I have already given the example of Pakistan and Nepal and China to elaborate the concept of democracy. So, children, in today's lecture, we will continue this chapter, and we'll do the next topic. And so, let's start the lecture with next topic. This lecture of the next topic of this chapter: what is democracy and why democracy? So, children, let's revise the meaning of democracy, as we have already discussed the definition of democracy. But let's revise the democracy once again. The meaning of democracy. So, children, democracy is a Greek word drawn by the two words. Demos means people, and it is defined basically as government in which the supreme power is vested in the people. And you know that demos means people and karatos means government. That is crazy. Karatos, that is crazy, means government. So democracy is a form of government in which the supreme power is vested in the people, and you can say that and exercised by them directly or indirectly through a system of representation, usually involving periodically held free elections. And according to the US President Abraham Lincoln, that is the 1809 to 1865, he defined democracy as government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Yani he has given the definition of democracy. He defined democracy as government of the people, by the people, and for the people. So children, we can say that democracy is by far the most challenging form of government for both politician and for the people. Now, next topic is types of democracy. Means you can say that forms of democracy. So there are two types of democracy. There are two forms of democracy. That is, the first one is direct democracy, and the second one is indirect democracy. Now, children, let's discuss about the difference between direct democracy and indirect democracy. First, let us know about what is direct democracy and what is indirect democracy. So, children, direct democracy refers to a form of government wherein citizens outrightly take part in the administration of the government. I repeat, direct democracy refers to a form of government wherein citizens outrightly take part in the administration of the government. And an indirect democracy implies a democracy in which people vote for their representative to represent them in the parliament. I repeat, indirect democracy implies a democracy in which people vote for their representative to represent them in the parliament. Now, children, what is the difference between direct democracy and इनडायरेक्ट डेमोक्रेसी, यानी डायरेक्ट डेमोक्रेसी को हम हिंदी में प्रत्यक्ष लोकतंत्र कहते हैं और इनडायरेक्ट डेमोक्रेसी को हिंदी में हम अप्रत्यक्ष लोकतंत्र कहते हैं. सो व्हाट इज़ द डिफरेंस बिटवीन, इन दोनों में अंतर क्या है? व्हाट इज़ द डिफरेंस बिटवीन डायरेक्ट डेमोक्रेसी एंड इनडायरेक्ट डेमोक्रेसी? So we have already discussed about the definition of both forms. So let's study about the differences. So the first one is in indirect democracy. The first point of direct democracy is that direct democracy exists in a country where people make their own laws and appoint government personal directly, and it exists in small states. And the first point of indirect democracy, and indirect democracy exists in a country where people elect their representatives who make laws on behalf of them through a legislature, and it exists in large states. Third point of direct democracy is it is real democracy, and indirect democracy, it is representative democracy. The fourth point of direct democracy is, children, it is not possible in modern democracies since size of the countries has become large along with huge population and other complex problems. It means कि डायरेक्ट डेमोक्रेसी जो है बच्चों, ये वास्तविक डेमोक्रेसी होती है, लेकिन ये बहुत सारे देशों में, ये इस प्रकार की डेमोक्रेसी यानी प्रत्यक्ष टाइप की डेमोक्रेसी, लोकतंत्र बहुत सारे देशों में नहीं पॉसिबल है, क्योंकि कहीं कहीं बहुत सारे ऐसे देश हैं जहाँ पे राज्य जो है वो बहुत बड़े हैं, उनमें बहुत पॉपुलेशन बहुत बड़ी है. तो इसलिए जो बहुत से ऐसे राज्य हैं, जैसे हमारे भारत में ही हमारे बहुत सारे ऐसे स्टेट्स हैं जहाँ पे स्टेट जो हैं वो बहुत बड़े बड़े स्टेट्स हैं और ह्यूज पॉपुलेशन है, इसलिए ये इस तरह की डेमोक्रेसी पॉसिबल नहीं हो सकती है. और बहुत सारे ऐसे जटिल समस्याएं भी हैं, कॉम्प्लेक्स प्रॉब्लम्स भी हैं, पॉलिटिकल प्रॉब्लम्स भी हैं. सो it is not possible in modern democracy since size of the countries has become large along with huge population and other complex problems. Now in indirect democracy, it emerged, means indirect democracy emerged because it is not possible to elect representatives at one single place in large scale and vast size countries. बिकॉज क्योंकि हम बहुत बड़े देश को जो है वो एक प्रत्यक्ष लोकतंत्र से हम अब बड़े लोकतंत्र को चलाना मुश्किल हो जाता है, क्योंकि ऐसे बहुत सारे देश ऐसे जैसे हमारा भारतवर्ष जहाँ पे स्टेट्स भी बहुत बड़े बड़े हैं, यूरोप, हमारे स्टेट्स तो यूरोप के देशों से भी बड़े बड़े हैं. तो उस जहाँ पे इस तरह की जो बड़ा लोकतंत्र है, जहाँ पे पॉपुलेशन जनसंख्या ज़्यादा है, तो वहाँ पे इनडायरेक्ट डेमोक्रेसी जो है वो इमर्ज्ड है, वो एग्जिस्ट है. सो इट इमर्ज बिकॉज इट इज़ नॉट पॉसिबल टू इलेक्ट रिप्रेजेंटेटिव्स एट वन सिंगल प्लेस इन लार्ज स्केल एंड वास्ट साइज कंट्रीज. Now the next point of direct democracy is it elects representatives by raising hands. For example, it existed in Greek city-states. Right now it exists in some Swiss cantons. Yani right now in some parts of the Switzerland it exists. Now in direct democracy, it elects representatives through secret ballot like voting system. For example, it exists in all modern democracies like India, USA, etc. Now children, let's discuss about the features of democracy. Now the first feature is, in a democracy, the final decision making power must rest with those elected by people. It means that you can say that only elected leaders should take major decisions. Like let's elaborate the point. In a democracy, what happened? The final decision making power must rest with those who are elected by the people, because it is they on whom people have entrusted the responsibility of taking decision or the welfare of the country and the people. So on basis of this point, on this basis, according to this point, let's take the example of one country, that is the Pakistan. What happened in Pakistan, children? The government of Pakistan, led by President Parvez Musharraf, who ruled the country till he was replaced by the President Muhammad Ali Zardari. And he could not be categorized as democratic government, because why the government cannot be categorized as democratic government? Because what happened, because on October 1999 he captured power after overthrowing a democratically elected government. And what he did, he declared himself as the chief executive of the country. And then what happened, and later changed his aim from chief executive to president. यानी पहले उसने जो है अक्टूबर 99 में उसने पूरी देश को जो है वो डेमोक्रेटिक आइडियल्स को खाड़ फेंका और अपने आप को उसने चीफ एग्जीक्यूटिव घोषित कर दिया और फिर उसके बाद जो है वो चीफ एग्जीक्यूटिव अपने आप को उसने डिक्लेयर किया. देन आफ्टर चीफ एग्जीक्यूटिव ही डिक्लेयर हिमसेल्फ एज प्रेसिडेंट ऑफ द पाकिस्तान. बट सिचुएशन चेंज्ड, लेकिन सिचुएशन चेंज हो गई कैसे कि इन 2002 थ्रू अ रेफरेंडम ही सक्सीडेड इन गेटिंग 5-year एक्सटेंशन. 2002 में उसे एक रेफरेंडम के थ्रू जो है उसको 5 साल का एक्सटेंशन मिल गया बेस्ड ऑन फ्रॉड एंड माल प्रैक्टिसेस. यानी जो कह सकते हैं कि बहुत ज़्यादा इलेक्शन में धांधली और करप्शन उसकी वजह से वो फिर से 5 साल का एक्सटेंशन ही एक्सटेंडेड, वो ही गॉट एक्सटेंशन ऑफ 5 years. बट सिचुएशन अगेन चेंज. In August 2002, General Pervez Musharraf amended the constitution by issuing a legal framework order. उसके बाद उसने अपना काम करना शुरू किया और उसने legal framework order उसने पास कर लिया. But what happened, children? Here what happened? The civilian cabinet was supervised by National Security Council, which was dominated by military officers. जो कि परवेज़ मुशर्रफ जो थे वो मिलिट्री के कमांडर भी रह चुके थे. So since the final power in Pakistan rested with military officers and General Pervez Musharraf and not with the elected representative of the people, जो पीपल ने जो अपने रिप्रेजेंटेटिव को इलेक्ट किया था उनके हाथ में कोई शक्ति नहीं थी, बल्कि सारी जो शक्तियाँ थी वो परवेज़ मुशर्रफ यानी मिलिट्री कह सकते हैं कि लीडर के पास थी, मिलिट्री ऑफिसर्स के पास थी. सो इट कैन बी सेड that in Pakistan the government was non-democratic. So on the basis of this discussion, children, इस तरह का जो सिचुएशन क्रिएट हुई जनरल परवेज़ मुशर्रफ के टाइम में कि वो पूरे मिलिट्री शासन था वहाँ पाकिस्तान में. तो हम on the basis of that decision, on the basis of that situation, we can say that कि government of Pakistan was non-democratic till the formation of coalition government. जब तक कि वहाँ पर जब पीपीपी और मुस्लिम लीग के बीच गठबंधन सरकार नहीं बनी तब तक वहाँ पर नॉन डेमोक्रेटिक गवर्नमेंट थी. सो अब हम एक केस लेते हैं. लेट्स टेक द नेक्स्ट केस ऑफ इराक. ठीक है. सिमिलरली एज इन इराक द रियल पावर रेस्ट विद द एक्सटर्नल पावर्स लाइक यूएसए एंड नॉट विद द लोकली इलेक्टेड लीडर्स. जो वहाँ पे लोकल इलेक्टेड लीडर्स थे उनके हाथ में शक्तियाँ ना होकर बल्कि जो एक्सटर्नल पावर्स थे, जो कि बाहर की शक्तियाँ थी जो उस पर इराक पर, तो जो एक्सटर्नल पावर्स जो बाहरी शक्ति थी जैसे यूएसए इराक पे रूल कर रही थी उनके हाथों में शक्तियाँ थी. सो दिस ऑल्सो कैन नॉट बी कॉल्ड पीपल रूल और डेमोक्रेसी. यानी ये भी लोगों की जनता का शासन या लोकतंत्र नहीं कहा जा सकता है. सो दिस कैन नॉट बी कॉल्ड पीपल रूल और डेमोक्रेसी. Therefore the first feature of democracy on the basis of these two example, children, the first feature of democracy is that in democracy the final decision making power must rest with those elected by the people. Now the next feature of the democracy is that a democracy must be based on a free and fair election where those currently in power have a fair chance of losing. So next feature is that, children, free and fair election. So children, we can say that the election must offer a real choice between political alternatives. In other words, we can say that people should have a choice to elect any political party. Or we can take the example of our country, India, that in India we people should have choice to elect any political party like BJP, Congress or some other party candidates. People should have choice to remove the existing rulers if they are not satisfied with their performances. मतलब लोकतंत्र में लोगों को जनता को ये अधिकार होना चाहिए कि वो अपनी ही चयनित निर्वाचित सरकार को वो हटा सकती है। जनता को ये पावर होना चाहिए, मतलब राइट होना चाहिए, लोकतंत्र में है कि वो जो सरकार को भंग भी कर सकती है अगर जनता पर गवर्नमेंट से, उनके कार्य से जो है वह अगर नाखुश होती है या उसको सेटिस्फाई या संतुष्ट नहीं होती है। सो दस अ डेमोक्रेसी मस्ट बी बेस्ड ऑन फ्री एंड फेयर इलेक्शन एट रेगुलर इंटरवल्स वेयर इन द पार्टी करेंटली इन पावर should have fair chance of losing the election. Now let's understand this feature by two example, by the two cases of China and Mexico, and find out if the governments in these two countries offer a system of free and fair election to elect a ruler of their own choice. So children, in the case of China, even though election to elect the country's parliament, that is the वहाँ पे जो कौन सी पार्लियामेंट किस कांग्रेस की थी कि नेशनल पीपल्स कांग्रेस, दैट पार्टी ऑल्सो कॉल्ड क्वेंगो रेनिनम डायबो दाउल, एंड every 5 years, held after every 5 years, election was held in China after every 5 years. But before contesting election, a candidate needs the approval of the Chinese Communist Party. जो चाइनीज़ कम्युनिस्ट पार्टी थी वो ही एक ऐसी पार्टी थी, साम्यवादी पार्टी, जो चाइना में रूल करती थी, उसी का डोमिनेशन था, उसी का आधिपत्य था इन द चाइना। तो कोई भी पार्टी वहाँ पे इलेक्शन तो हेल्ड होते थे, लोग रिप्रेजेंटेटिव चुनते थे, लेकिन चाइनीज़ कम्युनिस्ट पार्टी ही एक ऐसी पॉलिटिकल दल था जो अगर अदर पार्टीज़ भी अगर चाइना में इलेक्शन के लिए खड़ी होती थी बच्चों, तो उनको चाइनीज़ कम्युनिस्ट पार्टी से परमिशन लेनी पड़ती थी। तो आप कह सकते हैं ना कि यहाँ पे एक ही दल का जो है वो डोमिनेशन था। सो मोर इवन चाइना द गवर्नमेंट इज़ ऑलवेज फॉर्म बाय द कम्युनिस्ट पार्टी. So in other words, we can say that people in China have no freedom to contest election at their own, and also they have no choice to select their rulers out of different alternative parties. तो हम कह सकते हैं ना कि चाइना में लोगों को किसी और पार्टी को ये परमिशन नहीं थी कि चाइना को, मतलब चाइना में रह रहे लोगों को ये बिल्कुल आज़ादी नहीं थी कि वो आज़ादी से इलेक्शन में खड़े हो सकें और वो अपनी चॉइस से अपने रूलर्स को इलेक्ट कर सकें। बट तो ऑन दिस बेसिस वी कैन से दैट कि देयर इज़ नो डेमोक्रेसी इन चाइना इन ट्रू सेंस ऑफ टर्म. And children, it has nearly 3,000 members elected from all over China. Some members are elected by the army, but these members should have permission of Chinese Communist Party. Now in the second case of Mexico, what happened in Mexico? Mexico got independence in 1930. Okay children, so even though election are held after every 6 years to elect its president, and the country has never been under military rule, but all election till 2000 have always been won by institutional revolutionary party. मतलब कहने का मतलब है कि मैक्सिमो में 1930 में इंडिपेंडेंस मिला उसको, लेकिन हर 6 साल बाद मैक्सिमो में इलेक्शन होता है मैक्सिको में, और अपने प्रेसिडेंट को इलेक्ट करने के लिए. बट ऑल द इलेक्शन टिल 2000 हैव ऑलवेज बीन वन बाय इंस्टीट्यूशनल रेवोल्यूशनरी पार्टी. लेकिन वहाँ पर भी मैक्सिको में भी एक ही पार्टी थी जिसका नाम था इंस्टीट्यूशनल रेवोल्यूशनरी पार्टी, जिसको हम PRI कहते हैं, और ये आई से नहीं शुरू है, लेकिन वहाँ पे PRI इंस्टीट्यूशनल रेवोल्यूशनरी पार्टी है. यही पार्टी जो है हमेशा इलेक्शन जीतती है. विच यूज़ डर्टी ट्रिक्स टू विन द इलेक्शन. और ये मतलब जो है वो डर्टी यानी कहते हैं ना फ्रॉड या करप्ट ट्रिक्स यूज़ करती थी इलेक्शन को जीतने में, क्योंकि हर बार इलेक्शन होता था, हर साल, मतलब हर 6 ईयर्स के बाद, हर 6 साल बाद, तो हर 6 साल बाद यही पार्टी जो है वो इलेक्शन जीतती थी. So what happened? The election, so opposition parties have never managed to win the election there. So the election described above. So what happened? This cannot be considered as free and fair election. तो इसको भी हम नहीं मान सकते हैं. So the second feature is that democracy must be based on free and fair election where existing rulers have a fair chance of losing. So children, should we consider the election described above as example of people electing their rulers? What happened in China? What happened? The election do not offer the people any serious choice, क्योंकि एक ही कम्युनिस्ट पार्टी का वहाँ रूल है. They have no choose the they have to choose the ruling party and the candidates approved by Communist Party. So in the case of Mexico, what happened? In the Mexican example, what happened? People seem to really have a choice, but in practice they had no choice. वहाँ पे लगता है कि लोगों के पास चॉइस है, ऑप्शन है अपना रिप्रेजेंटेटिव चुनने का, लेकिन अगर देखा जाए तो वो प्रैक्टिस ही नहीं, वो उनकी जो उनका राइट है वो उसकी प्रैक्टिस ही नहीं है. So there was no way the ruling party could be defeated even if people were against it. तो वहाँ पे कोई ऐसा रास्ता ही नहीं कि अगर लोग अपनी सरकार से असंतुष्ट है वहाँ पर, तो वो रूलिंग पार्टी तब भी वहाँ से नहीं हट सकती है, क्योंकि उसका जो रूलिंग पार्टी वहाँ पर है अभी इंस्टीट्यूशनल रेवोल्यूशनरी पार्टी बच्चों, तो जो पार्टी है वो use dirty tricks to win the election. They use dirty tricks to win the election after every 6 years. So you can say that na children कि the election described above in these two countries cannot be considered as free and fair election. Now the third feature of the democracy is, the next feature of the democracy is universal adult franchise. That is one person, one vote, one value. Now democracy is based on fundamental principle of what children? Political equality. You know that democracy is based on a fundamental principle of political equality. So that gives us third feature of democracy. What? That one person, one vote, one value. It refers to the what? The enjoyment of right to vote by all the citizens of country without any discrimination on the basis of caste, creed, color or sex or education. And in India is the biggest democracy, children, you know that. So in India, all men and women of 18 years of age and above are given right to vote. You already know about that. This is called universal adult franchise. In universal adult franchise, all men and women of 18 years of age and above are right to vote. Thus we have universal adult suffrage, or you can say that universal adult franchise in India. However, children, what happened? In India it is practicing, in India it is in practice. But this principle of universal adult franchise is not available to the citizen of all the countries in the same proportion. There are many examples of denial of equal right or right to vote. ऐसे बहुत से examples हैं जहाँ पर बहुत सारे ऐसे देश हैं जहाँ पर ये राइट जो है वन वोट वन पर्सन वन वैल्यू वाला जो राइट है, प्रिंसिपल है, ये इक्वालिटी है जो पॉलिटिकल इक्वालिटी, वो नहीं है. एग्जाम्पल, देर आर मेनी इंस्टांसेस, देर आर मेनी एग्जाम्पल्स. जैसे कि आपका एग्जाम्पल, सबसे पहला एग्जाम्पल है कि इन एस्टोनिया. नाउ इन एस्टोनिया व्हाट हैपन इन साउथ अरेबिया. पहले हम एस्टोनिया पढ़ते हैं कि इन एस्टोनिया सिटीजनशिप रूल्स हैव बीन मेड नो स्ट्रिजेंट दैट पीपल बिलोंगिंग टू रशियन माइनॉरिटी फाइंड इट डिफिकल्ट टू गेट राइट टू वोट. एस्टोनिया में एस्टोनियन पीपल जो है ना बच्चों, उनको ही जो है वो वोट देने का ज़्यादा अधिकार है, और वहाँ पे जो रशियंस रहते हैं माइनॉरिटी, उनको बहुत प्रॉब्लम होती है, उनको इतना अधिकार नहीं है टू गेट द राइट टू वोट, या है ही नहीं अधिकार वहाँ पर टू गेट द राइट टू वोट. सो in Saudi Arabia, women do not have right to vote. And in Fiji, the electoral system is biased in favor of indigenous Fijian. In fact, the vote of an indigenous Fijian have more value than that of an Indian Fijian. यानी फिजी में क्या है, वहाँ पे जो चुनावी जो सिस्टम है, वहाँ पर क्या है, जो इंडियन फिजियन, जो इंडियन पीपल वहाँ पे जाके रह रहे हैं, उनको दे हैव लेस राइट टू वोट. उनके पास वो वैल्यू नहीं है, वो राइट ही नहीं है. So the third feature of democracy is that. So on the basis of these examples, and on the basis of these two examples, we can say on the basis of by these examples, that the third feature of democracy is that in a democratic country, each adult citizen must have one vote, and each vote must have one value. So we can say that democracy is based on a fundamental principle of political equality. This is the third feature of the democracy. Now next feature of the democracy is, you can say that last feature of the democracy is the rule of law and respect for rights. Now let's take the example of case of Zimbabwe. Now children, in order to, you can say that na, ki in democracy, any democracy should provide for a government that rules within limits by constitution law and citizen rights. So this is what exactly we mean by the rule of limits law. And the rule of law also involves what? Equality before law. यानी यहाँ पर जो है वो every citizen, every person should equal before law, which means that each citizen has an equal ability to seek and receive justice. यानी each person should have right to seek justice, to receive justice. So a democratic society should ensure that each citizen is equal before law. एक लोकतांत्रिक समाज को अपने लोगों को ये जो है उसको श्योरिटी देना होता है सिटीजन को, नागरिक को, कि वो सभी नागरिक जो है वो लॉ के समक्ष बराबर हैं. सो इट वुड इंश्योर दैट एवरीबडी हैज़ फ्री एक्सेस टू लॉ. एवरी पर्सन हैज़ राइट टू मूव इन द कोर्ट फॉर जस्टिस. हम सभी नागरिकों, डेमोक्रेटिक लोकतांत्रिक प्रणाली में, लोकतांत्रिक देश में बच्चों, लोगों, हर एक पर्सन को ये अधिकार है कि वो अपने लॉ कानून से अपने लिए न्याय मांग सके. सो द लीगल सिस्टम इन डेमोक्रेसी चिल्ड्रन शुड इंश्योर इक्वालिटी बिफोर लॉ बाय डिफेंडिंग कॉमन मैन अगेंस्ट अनजस्ट लीगल ऑर्डर. सो चिल्ड्रन, द राइट्स ऑफ सिटीजन मस्ट बी प्रोटेक्टेड बाय एन इंडिपेंडेंट जुडिशरी. और हमारे राइट्स की सुरक्षा का दायित्व, जो रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी है बच्चों, वो जुडिशरी पे दिया गया है. यानी जो ये जुडिशरी इज़ द इंस्टीट्यूशन ऑफ डेमोक्रेसी. सो जुडिशरी इज़ द थर्ड इंस्टीट्यूशन ऑफ डेमोक्रेसी. तो उस पर दायित्व है कि वो हमारे राइट्स का प्रोटेक्शन करें. So children, here what happened, let's take the example of Zimbabwe. What happened in Zimbabwe, children? Ki the Zimbabwe attained independence from white minority rule in 1980. Then from then onwards, the country has been ruled by the party ZANU PF, which led the freedom struggle. Then what happened, and that the party leader, and the party was led by leader Robert Mugabe. And in all the elections held since independence, this party has always been the winner. In fact, in spite of his popularity, Mugabe uses unfair practices and in the elections. So the constitution of the country, children. So in fact, in spite of the popularity, Mugabe uses unfair practices, unfair tricks in the elections. So the constitution of country has been changed several times by his government to make the president more powerful but less accountable. So children, elections are always won by his party, as I told you, through violence and harassment of the opposition, politicians, workers and journalists. So protests against the president were illegal, and government does not pay any attention. Heed means not paying attention. Heed means paying attention. तो यहाँ गवर्नमेंट जो है वो does not pay any attention to court judgments which went against it. So thus there is no rule of law and citizen rights are not respected. तो वहाँ जिम्बाब्वे में जो है वो रॉबर्ट मुगाबे की सरकार थी, वो अपने मनमानी ढंग से सरकार कर रही थी. वहाँ पे कोई भी कोर्ट जजमेंट होता तो वो सरकार उसको मानने से इनकार कर देती. तो यहाँ पे तो कोई भी कानून का कोई रूल ही नहीं था. सिटीजन्स के राइट का वहाँ सम्मान ही नहीं था. सो सिटीजन राइट्स आर नॉट रिस्पेक्टेड. सो रिसेंटली what happened children, कि recently Robert Mugabe was thrown out of the power after 37 years and Emerson Mnangagwa became the new president. So the above example of Zimbabwe is a pointer towards the fact, ये example जो है वो ये दर्शाता है कि that even the popular governments can be undemocratic and popular leaders can be autocratic. Regular elections are no guarantee for a democracy. Okay children? So children, on the basis of the example of Zimbabwe, the conclusion derived that states should respect the basic rights of citizens like freedom of expression, जो कि जिम्बाब्वे में नहीं था, freedom to protest, which was not in Zimbabwe, freedom to take political action, that was also not in the Zimbabwe during the time of Mugabe. So these rights should be protected by the judiciary, as I told you earlier, whose order should be obeyed by all. So हम कह सकते हैं the above discussion children. So a democratic government rules within the limits set by constitution, law and citizens' right. So the above discussion children will help us in summarizing the definition and the broad and extended features of the democracy. जैसे कि जैसे कि कौन कौन से जैसे कि like all the major decisions are taken by the मतलब on the basis of above discussion, children, we can summarize the broad definitions, the broad features of the democracy, the broad definition as well as the broad features of the democracy as all the first feature, all the major decisions are taken by the rulers elected by the people in consultation with others. And second, the election should be held regularly and be fair, so that citizen can change the rulers in case they are not satisfied with their performance. So next, this opportunity through the right to vote should be available, like universal adult franchise, that every person should have right to vote, and there should not be discrimination on the basis of caste, creed, and sex and color, caste, religion. Above 8, the citizen aged 18 years or above the 18 should have right to vote. So next, there should be a limit to the authority of the government, as we have discussed in the case of Zimbabwe, by the rules of constitution and rights of the citizen. Yani the citizen's rights should be respected in the democratic government. So children, we will stop here, and we have discussed the features of democracy one by one, and I hope that you will get the points. And children, in next lecture we will continue this chapter and we will discuss the next point. So please watch the video, and please listen and watch the video both, and take care of yourself and your family. Goodbye.